Okay, today I'm going to review Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neill. How Big Data Increases Inequality and Threatens Democracy. This book was a requested book. It was really short. I had seen it a while ago and I had planned on reading it, but I just never had the time. But I picked up a copy, I read it. So this book is all about how mathematical models and algorithms are used in the real world, and how those applications a lot of times they are biased or they're not formed correctly, and then people rely on these models, and then over time these models lead to inequality and bad outcomes in a lot of different areas where they're used. And she talks about all kinds of different uh, parts of the economy where they're used, from crime to credit scores to education. There's a lot of different use cases for algorithms, and she talks a lot about these areas and how the algorithms used in that field fail. So there's a lot of good stuff in this book, a lot of things I liked. The first is that the book is it's really short. It's not very long at all. It's 230 pages, so it's really quick. It's right to the point, and there's not a lot of filler in there, which makes it a really it's always a rewarding type of book to read. I think most people that read nonfiction, they have a long list of books that they want to get through. And when you get to a book that's really long and drawn out and doesn't really get to the point, it puts you behind in your schedule to read more books. And so I really appreciate this book, that it was short and direct and you didn't waste your time at all. She says what she wants to say and then it's done, which is really nice. And I enjoyed it and I appreciated that. The other good thing, the best part about this book, is that the author really understands mathematical models and algorithms. You can tell, and when she's describing them, the way they're applied. But really, most importantly, is when she talks about why these algorithms are failing to predict or why they're leading to bias. Her technical descriptions are extremely good. They're very accurate, and it's very clear. And that was the best part of the book for me. Unfortunately, she goes beyond just talking about the technical aspect of the models. She kind of gets into political and social analysis, and that's really where the book failed for me. But the technical stuff, when she's talking about the models and why they fail, it's very good. And one example she points to, or she uses in the book, that I thought was really interesting and something I hadn't thought too much about, is it's the example of predictive software that's predicting where crime is going to occur in a city. So that a police force, they have a limited number of cops. They'll predict where there will be crime, and then they send the cops out to that area. But what happens is they inevitably will find crime. I mean, even if it's minor, even if it's petty, they'll find stuff. Then what do? They take that information and they plug it back into the model, and now the data says that that area has even more crime. But they weren't policing the other areas, so the crime data doesn't spike in those areas. So then over time, the model will become more and more biased towards thinking crime will be in these areas. But then you send cops and then you just confirm your own bias, and then it just kind of exaggerates over time. Though you could adjust for it within the model, but I think the model she uses in the example isn't doing that. But you could correct for it theoretically, but I mean, it was an interesting use case. So while the technical stuff was really good, there were things I didn't like. And really, this book, for me, a huge portion of the book came across as very biased. And it's biased against algorithms and against mathematical models. And it's not that she says anything wrong about algorithms, but she never, ever talks about the good things that algorithms do. There's so many use cases for data and algorithms that lead to great causes. You have machine learning algorithms that can look for cancer in patients. Self-driving cars could save, tens of thousands of lives every year. There's so many use cases for data that are good, and she never talks about it. And so whenever she's mentioning algorithms and the people using them, she's only talking about the bad people and the bad uses. And so you get this very negative view of algorithms. And I think if someone was reading this book who was coming into it already distrusting algorithms, not understanding them, and really coming with a bias, this book could really confirm that bias, because the book in no way gives an overall perspective of the impact of algorithms. It only talks about the downside, the bad parts of the algorithms. And so if you read this book, you have to go in understanding that she's not going to talk about all the benefits and all the good things. And you're going to have to go read other books or look for other information in other sources to really get the full picture of how algorithms are used in all of society and all of science. So that was one thing that I didn't like about the book. Another thing is there's parts of this book where she's talking about social outcomes and what models will predict. And she says some things that I don't really agree with, that I thought kind of had faulty logic behind them. I'll point out one. She's talking about credit scores, and she's talking about a company that uses kind of, different data to predict credit scores than just like how much money you have in the bank, how much income you have. And one thing this company uses to predict defaults is they look at whether or not you spelled things correctly and use correct punctuation in the loan application. And the company thinks that this is correlated, at least I guess they have data suggesting it is correlated to defaults. And so they put that into the algorithm, and that is information that they use to give out loans or set interest rates. And the author thinks that this is really biased, and her logic is that the punctuation and spelling will be correlated to your level of education, and then the level of education would be correlated to your race. And you can find the statistics, and there are a lot of correlations out there. But I think she kind of jumps over the line here, because even if an individual uses bad punctuation or bad spelling, that's still an attribute of the individual. Really, the things that we need to watch out for, and she does specify, and she's right here when she talks about this, is that the bad things are really when you're using stereotypes of groups to predict an individual's behavior. That shouldn't be what you're doing. Like, for instance, if you live in a zip code that has a lot of crime, they'll predict that you'll commit a lot of crime. And that's really not fair, because there could be great people living in bad zip codes. There could be really smart people that just come from backgrounds that would lead people to predict they didn't have that level of education or knowledge. And so there are ways that stereotypes get baked in, but an individual's punctuation and spelling, that's an attribute of that individual. So I don't think that's racist at all, even if that might be correlated somehow with a race or socioeconomic background. I think that's like an individual attribute, so it's fair game to use. But that's kind of one thing where she kind of goes a little overboard in characterizing things as racist or bad for society. I think that's an issue with, the education system in America, or, a lot of other things that aren't the algorithm's problem. The algorithm's just predicting reality based on the way that it sees it. And if there are other problems in society, that will get baked into the predictions. And that's not necessarily the algorithm's fault. That's, just the unequal nature of reality. So I think she kind of goes overboard a little bit there. So watch out for that if you read this book. It's pretty clear when she starts talking about this type of stuff, so it's easy to watch out for. It's easy to catch. So don't let that turn you off of the book, but just be aware that she might go a little overboard with demonizing things, and her views on social issues aren't as clear as her views on the technical aspects of these algorithms. So be wary of that. And the last thing I'll say is she said some stuff about economics, which I really disagreed with. She worked for a hedge fund at one point, and she talks about how she thought the hedge funds were just bilking money from people because they would make money on trades. And the way she talked about it, she implied that the people on the other side of these trades were getting screwed, or they're worse off, which is not a fair assessment of trades. Like, even if you buy a stock and that stock goes up, it doesn't mean that the other person lost out. They might have sold that stock because they owned too much and they were rebalancing a portfolio. Maybe they needed liquidity, so they sold the stock. There's a lot of reasons you could sell a stock. It's not necessarily just that you think it's going to lose money, and then you made the wrong bet and the other side of the trade made the right bet. She doesn't seem to have a full appreciation for all the different nuances of economic trading, but that was a really tiny portion of the book. It's not really fundamental to any of her arguments. That's just something I caught, and really I caught it because that's something where I have the most background in, so I catch things there more readily. So don't be dissuaded by that fact, but I did catch little something that, and together with some of the other things I found, it kind of paints the picture of bias within the book. But overall, despite the fact that I think a lot of this book is biased in the way it's written and the way it describes things, I would still recommend it because the technical descriptions here are really good. And because the book is so short, even when you hit the bias, it's just a couple sentences and it moves on to other stuff. So it really doesn't stick and grind those biases into the book. It's just, she throws out some opinions and some characterizations of things, and I don't really agree with it, but the technical descriptions are really good in this book, and I would recommend people read it just for that. I would also recommend that you read some other books on algorithms, maybe books on AI. Algorithms to Live By was another good book. There's a lot of other stuff about big data that shows the beneficial uses of it. And just you should look into that and read that and be aware that that exists, because she's not going to give you the full representation of the topic in this book. But definitely, if you're interested, pick it up. It's a really short read. Again, 230 pages. It flies by. It's pretty engaging. I read it really fast. So, and I don't think there's no pictures, so you can get the audiobook. It's only a few hours, so if you read it on like 1.5 speed, it'll be over in like 4 or 5 hours. So it's a quick book to read. So if you're interested in that topic, pick it up and give it a read. I hope you like this video. Like, subscribe. I have more stuff coming in the future. I've got a big stack of books to read right now. A couple on AI, which I'm probably gonna get to soon. I've got another book called Prediction Machines that I want to review soon. But there's more stuff coming, so stick around, and I hope to see you in the next video.